Why did France, Belgium, the Soviet Union, and even Nazi Germany decide to cement tanks into the ground during World War II? At first glance, it might seem like an absurd idea, but in reality, it became a strategic solution. So, what was the reason? To understand why several countries decided to cement tanks into the ground during World War II, we first need to go back to World War I. In 1917, France introduced the Renault FT-17, a vehicle that would forever change tank design. It was small, light, and operated by just two men. But the real revolution was its fully rotating 360-degree turret. Thanks to this innovation, it could fire in any direction without moving the chassis, something completely new at the time. The FT-17 also set the standard configuration that we still recognize in modern tanks. The driver positioned at the front, the turret in the center as the core of the vehicle, and the engine at the rear. This design quickly became the global template for tank construction. When it entered combat in 1918, it proved its effectiveness against the heavy and slow British and German tanks. France produced thousands of units, and its success inspired many other nations. The United States built the M1917. Italy developed the Fiat 3000. The Soviet Union created the T-18, and it even influenced designs in Japan, Poland, and other European countries. However, military technology was advancing quickly. By the late 1920s, the FT-17 was already obsolete. Its armor was too thin and its mobility very limited. Yet thousands still remained in the arsenals of several countries. Destroying them seemed wasteful. That's when an ingenious idea emerged. If the tank could no longer fight on the move, its turret could still be deadly, this time mounted on a concrete fortification. And so the concept of tanks converted into static defenses was born. After the French practical solution, the idea of reusing old tank turrets spread quickly. France was the pioneer in this practice, incorporating turrets from light tanks such as the Renault R35 into its most famous defensive system, the Maginot Line. Their combat blocks and casemates were equipped with removable turrets, capable of firing both machine guns and light cannons. These turrets could be raised to engage and retracted to protect against bombardments. Standardization allowed for mass production, uniform maintenance, and the training of specialized crews. Belgium, with more limited resources, adopted the same strategy to reinforce its old fortifications around Liège and Antwerp. At Fort Eben-Emael, for example, Renault FT-17 turrets were installed to cover access points and dikes with 360-degree fire, creating a cost-effective and efficient defense in depth without requiring the deployment of new armored vehicles. The Soviet Union took this practice to an even greater scale. Before 1941, thousands of turrets from T-18, T-26, and T-24 tanks were integrated into the fortified regions of the Stalin Line. Specific bunkers such as the DOT-4 used complete T-26 turrets with their 45mm cannon. During the German invasion, additional defenses were improvised by burying both obsolete and modern tanks, from BT-5s to T-34s and KV-1s, to cover gaps and defend strategic cities like Leningrad, Moscow, and Stalingrad. Installing these turrets was no simple task. In France, mounting an R-35 turret on its concrete base took about 3.5 hours. The process required the base to be prepared in advance, transporting the turret by crane, carefully lowering it into place, connecting the rotation mechanisms, and testing the armament. Standardization not only accelerated installation but also ensured uniform performance across all positions. There were two main ways to install these tanks: permanently, as in the Maginot Line or the Stalin Line, or improvisationally, in response to emergencies. Permanent installations were part of large fortifications. Engineers selected strategic locations with clear fields of fire, dug large pits, and built reinforced concrete bases with anchor points for the tank or turret. Sometimes underground chambers were added for the crew and ammunition storage, making the tank only the tip of the iceberg. In these cases, either the entire tank could be installed, with tracks removed to ease placement, or only the turret, lowered precisely onto a rotation ring to allow 360-degree movement. Once connected and armed, the installation was camouflaged with nets, paint, or vegetation, a process that could take weeks. When installations had to be quick, such as during the German invasion of the Soviet Union or the final years of the Eastern Front, tanks were buried in improvised positions. A defensive site was chosen, a pit dug deep enough to bury the tank up to the roof of its hull, leaving only the turret visible. The vehicle was driven into the hole, its tracks removed, the space around it backfilled with compacted earth, and sandbags added for extra protection and camouflage. Small communication trenches were even built to allow crew rotation and ammunition supply. With this method, a tank could be buried and operational relatively quickly, though it remained immobile and vulnerable to direct artillery or specialized infantry attacks. After the fall of France and Belgium in 1940, the Wehrmacht found itself with thousands of intact fortifications, filled with buried tanks and operational turrets. Many of these positions were captured without fighting, thanks to the speed of the Blitzkrieg, and their armament was considered a valuable resource under the German Beutepanzer system. On the Atlantic Wall, the Germans reused French R-35 and ft-17 turrets, dismantling them and mounting them on concrete bunkers along the European coast, from Norway to the Spanish border. Each position had an official code, such as Panzerstellung 746F for R-35 turrets. Their role was to defend beaches, ports, and strategic access points with machine gun and light cannon fire, rather than to stop enemy tanks. On the Eastern Front, as the war turned defensive, damaged or obsolete German tanks, from Panzer III to Panzer IV, were buried to create static firing points in improvised lines such as the Panther Wotan. The most advanced version was the Panther turret, installed in bunkers known as Panther Term 3, which combined the 75mm KWK 42 gun with reinforced concrete protection and underground space for the crew, ammunition, and ventilation. These were deployed in critical defensive lines such as the Siegfried Line and the Gothic Line. Most of these fortifications were destroyed in combat, abandoned or dismantled after the war, although some French turrets in the Channel Islands and a few Panther Term in Italy and Germany survive today as historical monuments. In the end, these buried tanks had a second life, showing ingenuity and practicality in times of scarcity and intense warfare. And that's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.